There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another installment of my occasional series called In Other Words, in which I talk about interesting vocabulary, slang, grammatical patterns, and whatnot that I encounter in my reading. As I often say when I begin one of these videos, I do not hold myself out to be an expert. I just love learning new language, new expressions, and new vocabulary, and I do a little bit of a deep dive on Google and maybe look up stuff in some of my reference books, but probably I make a lot of mistakes in what I say here, and I'm counting on you to correct me. But it's fun to talk about language. So here we go. Today's vocabulary comes from three books that I've read recently. The first one is a 1939 novel from the UK, The Priory by Dorothy Whipple. I had mixed feelings about this novel, but couldn't stop turning the pages, so it was an enjoyable read despite the faults that I found with it. There was some interesting vocabulary in it, and I'm going to talk about that now. The first one is about one of the servants in the manor estate, and her name is Bertha, and Dorothy Whipple writes of Bertha, she had a lot of fun in the servants' hall, taking them off. Taking them off was a new expression to me. The only meaning I know of to take a person off is to remove someone from a project, or take someone off jury duty, take someone off the project, something like that. But the British idiomatic meaning, I don't know if it's still current. Hopefully some of my UK subscribers will tell me, is to copy, to imitate, to impersonate someone, to copy the way a particular person speaks or behaves. That's a new one to me. So Bertha was imitating her employers and entertaining her fellow servants. That was a new one. Another one is physog, and I kind of recognized it as a short form of a word that I, for some geeky reason, learned very early in my life, like maybe as a teenager, but certainly early in my undergrad days, and the longer word is physiognomy. The British pronunciation is physiognomy. Apparently the Americans pronounce the G, physiognomy. And that is basically the study of faces, facial expressions, particularly judging character by face, by someone's face. And I have used that word throughout my university career and gotten lots of brownie points. I remember some novel I was writing about, and some character or some reference was a physiognomic echo of something else, and I think I got an extra 7% on my mark because I used that word correctly. I've always remembered physiognomy. Physog is a short form of that word, and it just means face. I'd never heard of it. Apparently, at least in the late 1930s in the UK, it was used in that way to mean just somebody's face. Some rude woman is observing one of the main characters. She's a middle-aged woman about to get married, and some stranger, a rude young woman, sees her getting out of the bridal car and going into the church in her white dress and says, "Fancy putting a physog like that into white satin. So rude!" Next is a clever dick. It's spelled lowercase d in the novel, but most references I found are with uppercase D, and it just means a clever person, a clever man. But more specifically, it means somebody who has a high opinion of their own intellect and lords it over, is condescending, shows their intelligence in a way that's annoying, a clever dick. A know-it-all, basically. And the last one from the Dorothy Whipple novel is cry off. And that was a new one. One of the main characters with her new husband, she doesn't want to go to the party, so she cries off. She cried off and tried to persuade him to go without her. So in context, she begged off, she made an excuse not to go back on her promise, to cry off. The next book that I have a few pieces of vocabulary from is this biography of E.F. Benson. I just have done a full review of it. I was buddy reading it with Leah, my Litzy friend from Canada, and came across some interesting vocabulary. The first one is fretwork. Now this was interesting. I won't bother to look up how it came up in the biography, but fretwork is a type of ornamental design in wood done with a fret saw. So I'm going to show you some examples of fretwork. It's an interlaced decorative design. And what I'm also going to show you what a fret saw is. Why do they call it fret? Okay, so there was a noun. There is a noun, antiquated, dating from the late 14th century. Fret, which means an ornamental, interlaced pattern. And it has no etymological link to the verb fret, which means to worry, which comes from the Proto-Germanic languages. So interesting. I wondered if there was a connection, but according to the online etymology dictionary, no connection. Next one is persiflage. E.F. Benson's brother is describing what E.F. Benson was like conversationally. E.F. Benson preferred repartee to discussion, and this is a direct quote from his brother Arthur. He delights in a kind of brisk and lively persiflage, which he really does very well, playing it like lawn tennis with many dexterous strokes. And persiflage is light mockery or banter. I like persiflage. Now, am I pronouncing persiflage right? Let's check. Listen up.
Persiflage. Persiflage.
I got it.
Persiflage.
My favorite line from Steel Magnolias: "If you can't say anything nice, come sit by me." Persiflage. And three more. These are all from Barbara Pym's last novel, Quartet in Autumn, which I just finished reading and did a full review of the other day. The first one is, I'll give you the sentences for each one. Letty did not fancy herself in the role of gooseberry. Gooseberry? Basically, it means the third wheel. The single person on an outing, out on an evening with lovey-dovey romantic couple, and Letty's old friend gets engaged to a younger man, and Letty feels like the third wheel. She's not interested in being a gooseberry, but why do they use gooseberry for that meaning? According to the OED, it also meant a chaperone, which that kind of fits, right? Doing gooseberry was to be a chaperone. Apparently, this is an interesting blog entry. I'll link it in the show notes because I've just scanned it. But according to this blog entry on the Oxford Etymologist blog, it was traditional in the early 19th century for a young boy to accompany romantic lovers out on their dates, and he was instructed proverbially to pick daisies, and he was called a daisy picker. And this etymologist wonders, and they don't understand how that might have gotten transformed to gooseberries instead of daisies, but that's the best they come up with. It's an interesting blog entry, and the connection with goose they're confused by, but have a look at the full entry. It's interesting. Two men in the novel are dining together. I think it's Christmas dinner, and the one man has just topped up his glass of wine or sherry or whatever they're drinking, and his guest, Norman, says, "Pushing the boat out, aren't you?" That's a curious expression I had never heard. And it means to be lavish in one's spending or celebrations. But the origin of it is very curious. It comes from pushing boats out when they are beached and pushing them out into the water. This is from the Phrase Finder website. because boats are usually too big for one person to push out. So when you help somebody push their boat out into water, it's an act of generosity. Just like if you help somebody with their car that's broken down in present day. It later came to mean idiomatically, or in a kind of a casual way, during the 1930s, to buy a round of drinks, to push the boat out, to be generous. And in more modern usage, it has shifted to be extravagant and spend money and live it up for yourself, not to be generous, not only to be generous for other people, but to live high off the hog for your own self. So interesting. And the last one is a part of the plot. One small part of the plot turns around a woman making a pass and flirting and stealing a man away from his fiancée. At a certain point in the novel, two of the women, one of whom is about to be jilted by this other woman, says, "She made a dead set at him, you know." So dead set. Dead set, what I know is, it's an adjective phrase. I am dead set against it, which means I am rigidly, forcefully, adamantly against it. Or I guess, although it's not as common in my memory to say I'm dead set for something, but dead set means adamant. Strong opinion about something. To make a dead set at someone was new to me, but it fits with what I did know, so all of these are obsolete. My subscribers will tell me if that's not true, but to make a determined and resolute effort to obtain something, gain the favor of someone, or to make a similarly determined and resolute attack upon or effort against someone. But for this meaning, which flows from the others, is to make a determined attempt to win the affections of someone. Now, dead set comes from 19th century British hunting vocabulary. Dead means absolutely, set means rigid, and it was a phrase to describe the physiognomy of the hunting dogs just before the race, before the hunt began. The way that their eyes were trained on the fox, and the way their bodies and their head was held so rigidly as they focused so intently on their target. Dead set. So that's where it comes from. But to make a dead set at someone, that's curious. So that's what I've got for you. I have been having a hell of a good time jotting down many expressions and grammatical patterns and pieces of vocabulary from the Victorian literature that I've been reading for Victober. So I have so much it might be a two-parter, but I'm hoping to have that for you before the end of Victober. My physog is getting a little red because I'm on my third glass of wine, but I hope I don't come across as being a clever dick wanting to share all this new vocabulary with you. Whatever you do, please don't take me off in your video. Although I do like a little bit of persiflage. I'm now going to imbibe the rest of this delicious bottle of wine, whether it's pushing the boat out or not. In fact, when I look at the bottle of wine beckoning to me on the kitchen counter, I'm dead set at it. Thanks for watching. Ha ha!